Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the Columbia Global Center's Paris. We're Columbia University's academic center in France with a footprint at Reed Hall since 1964. It's wonderful to be gathered today in this lovely afternoon, hearing people chit-chat and mingle in the courtyard, and hearing, c'est beau, or something to that effect, and then walking into this beautiful room and being even more astounded. And the reason for that is that you have the special honor this evening to have a sneak peek at Reed Hall has often been called the crown jewel of Columbia University, but I believe the room in which you are in is now the ultimate crown jewel, and that's thanks to the generosity of Paul Leclerc and Judith Ginsburg, who have made the renovation of the space possible. So for the first time this evening, I'm saying welcome, not to the Grande Salle, but to the Grande Salle Ginsburg-Leclerc. Voilà. So for the past decades, one of our main focuses beyond teaching and research has been the promotion of the rich artistic, cultural, and intellectual ties that connect France and the United States. But as the world has expanded beyond bilateral relations, so has our programming, which is now connected to Columbia's global network of centers across continents. As the Paris Center, we are proud to not just represent France, but broader issues that tie us to the European continent with its rich and complex history. Benefiting from the presence of distinguished faculty members at our center, we like to host convivial conversations inviting scholars and artists to reflect on their practice. And as you'll see, there's even a light reception set up outside so that we can continue mingling in conviviality. In this spirit, I'm most delighted to welcome today's speakers. Barry Bergdoll, currently a fellow at the Institute for Ideas and Imagination, another brilliant idea that Paul Leclerc had. You are the Mayer Shapiro Professor of Art History and Archaeology at Columbia University. Your work has focused on the examination of architectural movements of the 19th and 20th centuries, with a particular focus on European and American modernism. In addition to your academic endeavors, you have held various influential positions throughout your career, serving, to name just one, otherwise we'd be here for a long time, as the Philip Johnson Chief Curator of Architecture and Design at the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York from 2007 to 2018, where you organized numerous groundbreaking exhibitions and curated collections that explored the evolution of modern architecture. Your contributions to the field extend beyond academia and curatorial work, as you have authored and edited numerous books and articles, making significant scholarly contributions to the study of architecture. Such a distinguished trajectory, you may ask, how may it be explained? Well, by the brilliant undergraduate education that Barry has received at Columbia University. So for the undergraduates amongst you, go speak to Barry at the reception. He is your peer, he is a Columbia grad. Barry, thank you for being here today and for guiding us through what should be a most fascinating conversation, let's say more broadly, on the relationship between art, architecture, and cultural identity. No living artist today embodies this problématique better than Mr. Anselm Kiefer. Mr. Kiefer, if I may, thank you for accepting our invitation to speak this afternoon. We are most honored to have you at our center, which, for the anecdote, you may be amused to know, was a former porcelain factory and a schoolhouse for young Protestant boys. And I mentioned this as in your first atelier in Germany, in Buchen, was a schoolhouse. And you have commented on this schoolhouse saying that you like to settle in places, you're worried. You like to settle...
What was this?
Your first atelier in Germany, in Buchen, was a schoolhouse, if I'm not mistaken. And I have heard you say in interviews that you like to settle in places that are layered in history and some suffering. So I let you imagine, the punishing of these Protestant schoolboys, amongst which the young André Gide. Nice. Okay, I'm almost done. But today, it is not of the layers of Reed Hall's history that we are here to speak, but of your unique relationship to architecture via the figure of the monument and the ruin. Born on March 8, 1945, you have emerged from the ruins of Germany's history, and through your work, which dialogues continuously with the consequences of the war and the Holocaust, you have become the most important artist of your generation. And I think the gathering today attests to this. There's so much enthusiasm in this room. The unconventional materials you use, yes, there is, like lead, straw, ashes, and dried flowers, give your work a tactile...
And shit.
And let us not forget that too, yes. I'm being recorded, so... yes, that too. And dried flowers give your work a tactile and visceral quality that evoke both a sense of decay and renewal. Your gargantuan artistic vision that delves into ancient mythology, biblical narratives, Germanic folklore, and literary works extends beyond the boundaries of traditional art forms. You have created monumental installations that invite the viewer into a contemplative and introspective state of mind where history, memory, and personal reflection converge. It is redundant for me to say that your contributions to contemporary art have garnered international acclaim and recognition, with works exhibited in major museums and galleries worldwide, including the Pantheon. But you are alive and kicking.
I will be there very soon.
Voilà. I like how you're settling the grounds.
I have a place there. Yeah.
And so, voila, on that note, I will just end my words of welcome with a profound sense of gratitude. Thank you so very much.
So I'll be very brief in my introduction because Séverine was so excellent in hers, and I want to get to, I have an encyclopedia of images that were supplied by Anselm's atelier, and we're going to flip around in it. But I want to concentrate on some things that I have encountered. I was invited happily to your exhibition at Gagosian last fall in New York, and it was completely overwhelming to be confronted by these extraordinary large-scale paintings of sometimes very haunting places, and also then in your studio at Croissy-Beaubourg, which I adored visiting, to discover that you often paint even at the scale of huge canvases, individual bricks, as though you're building when you're painting. So it's one of the many topics I want to talk to you about. I don't have a place in the Pantheon, but I spent a great deal of time there in the context, right? You come later. In the context of the bicentennial of the French Revolution, thinking about this monument. So I want to first talk to you about the role of painting and of architecture in your painting, but then I want to talk about what, if you haven't seen people in the room, you need to walk across the Luxembourg Gardens and see the way in which the whole complexity of the experience of the Pantheon has been given another layer of resonance by these astounding installations of vitrines, which are the permanent part of a twofold intervention that Anselm Kiefer made there a few years ago. But let's start at the very beginning. We'll come back to this extraordinary painting in and around, which I think is a kind of fulcrum in your relationship to architecture. But we should start, not at the school in the house, but I wanted to ask you, you were, as Séverine just mentioned, you were born and you grew...
Not here.
I'm
born in Donaueschingen.
In Donaueschingen, yeah. But that we don't have...
And, you know, when I was born, my mother was in the hospital in the underground, and in this night, our house was bombed by the French military. And if I wouldn't have born in this night, we wouldn't be not there, you know. It was interesting. And then our house was in ruins. We moved to the next house, and I had no Spielzeuge, toys. I had no toys, sure. And I built houses with the bricks from these ruins. So I did wonderful houses, two floors, young, I was not in school yet, not. And this was my first connection with architecture.
These they've provided us.
No, this is Ottersdorf. This is later.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But I would like to start with this, which is the work I think that first brought you international attention. Just like this evening, well, speaking of ruins, just
American attention.
Really?
The Germans hated me for that.
So for those who don't know this work, I'm sure you all do, this is a photographic work from 1969 called Occupations. I was very struck as I've become more and more into direct confrontation with your painting, in which there's almost always a human absence, that your work starts with these confrontations that you undertook personally with architecture, this occupation of sight, which was, in a sense, self-portraits, defiant self-portraits, where you are present among ruins, sometimes as here in Arles, standing somewhat innocently, but then provoking us even further when you give this provocative gesture in front of the ruins of the Roman Imperial Empire.
I occupy all the European countries, one after the other.
So yes, we can.
And
yeah, so can you talk to us about this, this very first series of work that takes us to ruined sites in which you are somehow confronting their meaning or interacting with them? Do you have?
No, it was just eine Selbsterfahrung. Was heißt das, Selbsterfahrung? I wanted to know something about me, what I would have done in those times, because I had no idea about this in the 60s. In Germany, this was not known, what happened. In school, we had just 2 weeks about the nationalism, 2 weeks. Alexander the Great, we had more, And so I thought there is some big, horrible, big thing, what I don't know. And I wanted to experience myself what it was. So I was going through the countries in Europe, and I was saluting, and then I had a lot of experiences.
So how were these works received?
In Germany, until now, they hate me, it's clear. Mm-hmm. And but the Americans, the American Jews, they made my career, because then it was shown in America, and they understood this, And I remember, when I did this for my exam, mm-hmm. when I had 8 semesters there, then I proposed this as my work, And there was a lot of problematic between the professors. And there was one professor who was in Auschwitz, Küchenmeister. You don't know him, he's not so known, but Küchenmeister. And he said, it's funny, And he said, yes, But I said to these professors, I want the best note, If not, forget it, And it was a little bit provocating, yes.
Let me just skip ahead a little bit. Well, I'm going to give you the pleasure of looking at these early works. And stop me, Anselm, if there's one in particular you'd like to talk about, either with
that's
me.
Caprarola.
Yeah.
Look at this architecture. It's fantastic, no?
So how did you choose which buildings you were going to stop in front of on this
to get a good photo? This is good, no?
Yeah. But you didn't bring this gesture back to the buildings that have now been loomed so large in your painting.
I didn't understand.
So you did not bring this gesture of defiance in front of these famous monuments, in front of some of them in ruins. You didn't bring them then to Berlin, to Munich, to places where you've depicted buildings in your more recent work.
No, I was not. I was not doing it in Germany. They would have killed me. No, it was forbidden in Germany to do this. Fortunately, it's forbidden still today. And so I couldn't do it in Germany. And Germany didn't conquest themselves. So
then let's fast forward. I hope this won't be too irritating for the audience. We're going to go past works, but you, if you glance over your shoulder and see something you want me to stop on before I get to where we're landing. These are some early works. I think you're going to see the extraordinary transformation. You see already something that fascinates me, which is now the architecture has taken front stage in one point or sometimes 2 point perspective, but there's a total absence of humans, of personages in these empty spaces of very evocative architectures.
I wouldn't say this. You know, my work is not, the human beings are not absent, because you see always the remnants, die Spuren.
The traces.
The traces of human beings everywhere on my paintings. So they are not absent. The humans are not absent. Okay. They are in. Yeah. Too much even in, you know.
Could we go ahead to this one? So this we saw on the title slide. This painting of 1981, Innenraum, difficult I think to translate because of course Innenraum means interior space, but it also has a larger kind of spiritual space in sense in German, is the reconstruction of a space that had disappeared from the map of...
That's the Reichskanzlei.
Yes, this being the Reichschancellery in Berlin, a building that has disappeared. Many of your more recent paintings evoke buildings that are still with us, but here you actually recreated a building that had been bombed into oblivion and lost. I wonder, what was this moment for you in 1981 to recreate?
No, in those times I studied a lot the art in the 30s in Germany, and I found out that there was no painting in this time what I would consider to be a painting. It was just nonsense, you know. But the architecture was different, because the architecture, you cannot say that in Paris, where is this big building?
You think of Trocadero?
No, where's the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville?
Yeah, the
Trocadero,
the
that's
Trocadero,
it.
yes.
The Trocadero. You cannot say this is fascistic architecture. It's a traditional architecture. And so it was in Germany. The architecture, you cannot say that, for example, today the ancient Luftwaffenministerium, what I painted, is fascistic. It's traditional architecture. And Speer, he was a very bad guy, you know, because we found out later, 20 years ago, that all his famous book, what he wrote about himself, what I read, is wrong. He changed the facts, you know. But the architecture, for me, it's not fascistic, because the Trocadero is not fascistic, you know. It's a certain architecture in a certain time, and it's very traditional.
I'm going to push you though, because you don't choose to paint Trocadero. You don't paint I had a moment in your studio. I was fascinated to discover you had a reference to a book. This is maybe a little bit inside architectural history of Franco Borsi, which makes this argument about the fact that fascistic architecture is really part of a larger neoclassical monumental architecture that one finds in regimes of all stripes of the 1930s from Washington, D.C. to Paris.
But Haussmann is not a fascist architect, you know. He wanted to give a view to Paris, a new how you say, a new view, no?
But I'm going to be provocative, because the buildings that you choose are highly recognizable for their place in the Third Reich. If it's the Air Ministry, if it's the
But fortunately, that was all destroyed then. Fortunately, it's okay, you know.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that, you know, it's wrong to say you like fascism because it uses these buildings, because these buildings are in a certain architectural tradition. Yeah.
But what draws you to them? What brings you to the choice of those buildings, or to want to create this type of
Because it's part of me. It's part of me. These buildings, you know, this architecture is part of my education, of my, yeah.
Maybe we, let's fast forward ahead. I think you're getting a view in the audience of this extraordinary corpus of
This
work
is-
that one can put
This
together.
is a building was done by Kreis.
Yes.
It was meant, it's not built, but it
Yeah.
was meant to be a soldier monument somewhere. Yeah.
Let's stop with, yes, this one. Of course, there's a whole series on the unknown painter, evoked in
So there
evocations
I play with the word of the unknown soldier, you know, in Paris. So I played with the word of unknown painter, yes.
But let's move specifically to, I have to go very quickly into the more recent work. There you go. Okay, this continues the theme. This is not a ruin, but this is an existing a work. This is the Air Force Ministry of the Third Reich, then revivified in East Germany to be the Ministry of Ministries. Then it served very provocatively in the years immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall as the Treuhand, to redistribute monies and belongings and try to, in a certain sense, administer the financial reconstruction of the unified German state. And of course, not only have you recorded it, but you have brought this spectral flying figure over. Can you,
That's the painter, you know, the palette with the wings.
Mm-hmm.
It means that I use the palette with wings since the 60s in paintings, and it means that it's a kind of transition or of spiritual meaning over the landscape, what the painter is, how the painter uses the landscapes and the buildings and so. And the palette is a symbol of a painter, you know.
So this intrigues me because, of course, I'm trying to write about these works and think about these works. And as someone who knows the history of 20th century architecture, but also the history of 20th century politics, I cannot not see what that building is.
You cannot see?
I cannot not think about what that building is. So I want to
But I
hear.
changed it completely. You think still with your painting, with your believing, but I changed it.
Yes, well, it's now yours. You have painted it. In a certain sense, you have redesigned it. But is it important?
I want to change you, no? I want to change your knowledge about this.
Good. So this is the aim of the representation.
You want to change something when you do something, you know. You don't want that it stays like it is. You want that it's an other view on it. And also, I think you should be able to use things like this in another way. You should not hide it below, that it doesn't come up, because it will come up anyway, you know. Today in Germany, a lot of these things comes up, you know. It's horrible, not only in Germany, everywhere, you know. But I want to change it, you know.
And so you, in a certain sense, you change it by appropriating it and resituating it?
No, I don't appropriate it. I give another view of it. I make it collapsing in a way.
I was very struck by the first time I came to your studio by arriving and realizing that there are winged figures in the
entrance,
in the entrance, and then of course an airplane. And we have here an airplane of your crafting, and here we have this spectral flying angel-like figure, almost as though it has escaped out of Botticelli or something like that, over the former Air Force Ministry. So these themes of
but when you look at the painting itself, you know, you can see that the palette with wings is made in the same way as a building. I incorporate the building, I change it completely. So, you know, the colors of the wings are the same colors as the building. So it's completely umgestülpt. Yeah, turned upside down. Yeah.
Fascinating. We have a whole series of these. You see, this has a kind of corpus, but this
You have to look very
One of
quickly.
the difficulties, of course, of all art historians is that everything is the same size on the screen.
This is this famous airport.
Yes, Templehof.
Templehof. And I was there to do photographs. They called me once if I want to do something in Templehof, you know, and I wanted to do, but it was not possible because they wanted other things with Templehof. They wanted to have, I don't know, entertainment and stuff. They had fashion shows in and so, and I said, oh, no. And this is a Templehof, and Templehof too is considered as a fascist architecture, but it's not at all fascist. The architect comes before, he was born before the Third Reich, and it is a wonderful architecture, you know, all the buildings, all the stripe, the landing stripe, and this is a fantastic architecture. But I transformed it, you know, there come little pieces of gold coming down here, so it's Danae. You know the story of Danae, no? Okay.
I think maybe you should recount the story of Danae, because...
So Danae was the daughter of whom?
I'll tell you, the daughter of Zeus, I
But
think.
she was a daughter who was impregnated by God, no? And then the father of Danae had a prophecy that her son will kill the father, him. And then he put his daughter in a tower, closed it, that nobody could get in contact with her. But it was Zeus, you know. He sent his sperm in form of golden rain, and she was pregnant, and she killed the father. The son killed the father. So this is, but you know this, no? No? So, and this was, then I thought, this building is Danae, you know.
Can I read to you a few lines? I tried to deal with this painting and think about it. It's very teasing for me, and see what your reaction to this is. All of this makes the gold leaf-encrusted ceiling trusses of the airport hall, inscribed with the name of Zeus, who, as you just told us, whose shower of golden rain came down upon Danae, even more evocative. And not only because of the mythological dimension the Nazis gave to so many of their undertakings, from culture to transport to the waging of war. Here, a temple of steel and glass, clad in limestone, an architecture of gridded rational order, recalled in your scoring of the canvas, was calculated for the conquest of Europe, serves almost as an imaginary abode for the myth of Zeus's access to the sequestered Danae in her tower by appearing as a shower.
It's a quoting, or you wrote this?
This is a quoting myself. Golden rain. So I want to know, as I look at this place, I think Templehof, what did it serve as? It actually served in the end for the Allied provisioning.
Tempelhof is famous for the Luftbrücke.
Yeah, for the Allied provisioning of Berlin.
Because, you know.
For the candy bombers.
Yeah. Then the American came with all these machines, and it was a big enterprise, you know. And then the pilots throw through the window little chocolates, you know, for the kids. Mm-hmm. And then they called now them Rosinenbomber. Mm-hmm. And so for this reason, this building is very important for Germany, because it makes his enge Verbindung.
This close connection.
Close connection to America from this time on.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I like to do this. Danae and the Rosinenbomber, Resinbomber. It's nice to combine this, no? You don't think so?
So let me just move ahead in this series. This was another, oops, I'm going to go back to the very beginning of this series.
This is an architect I like very much.
Yes,
it's
that's
Kahn.
what I wanted to ask you. We
Kahn.
share that. I'm from Philadelphia, so I grew up with Louis Kahn. I actually saw Louis Kahn
I saw
when I was
this
a
building
child.
in India. You know, he built university in India, and this is fantastic. I heard now they want to demolish it.
This is very much threatened.
It's horrible.
Now.
No. It's
yeah.
such a wonderful architecture. You know.
So, Louis Kahn, you love Louis Kahn. You go to India and discover Louis Kahn. What?
By accident, yes. I was traveling there and I saw this building, and they told me it's Louis Kahn.
So what drew you to this building, this architecture when you saw it? Of course, the other thing I find fascinating here is the architecture spreads almost beyond the canvas. It kind of almost bursts into this is a really, you've captured the kind of monumental presence of Kahn.
This is composition, you know.
Yeah. But tell me about in this work and in so many other works that the audience can't see this
I
up
like
close.
very much the holes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it gives a view to another infinite world, you know. It's like the painting of Van Gogh, you know, Auvers-sur-Oise, this chapel, and the Fenster, the windows.
Yeah.
You could they go in the nothingness, you know. You remember this painting, no? I hope. It's the most important painting of Van Gogh. and there is the same effect, you know, to go through and in the infinity, you know. And it's also a correlation with the infinity of this whole and the bricks, you know. You can see how it's constructed, brick by brick by brick. So it's another kind of infinity.
Mm-hmm. So I think of two things that Kahn is famous for saying. One was a realization when I came to your studio that over and over again these paintings of brick buildings, not only do you render brick, which is made of dirt and ignoble materials, frequently you use gold to render it. So you infuse gold into this architecture, but that it seems to me that you actually paint the individual bricks as though you yourself are building.
It's a kind of meditation to do this, you know. You have to do one by one. So it's meditation, and you are in the building then, included, you know. And I did a lot with bricks. I traveled a lot in India, and they have these brick factories. You know, they have them wherever they can find clay, mm-hmm. And they dry it on the sun, and then they build it, and then they staple it and put fire. And when the bricks are done, the brick factory is gone too, you know, because they take all the bricks and build something with. And I was very fascinated when I traveled to India that you see they're everywhere. In China, by the way, too, on the Silk Road, they have the same brick factories. They had the same brick factories. And Mao, he thought he can do the roads, the Silk Road. You know, the Silk Road is very modern now by the new politic of China, the Silk Road, you know. And he thought he can do roads with bricks, Mao, because then you could build a brick factory, like the Indians does, and then 20 kilometers wider and another brick factory, and could do the roads quicker, you know. But they all deteriorate. The bricks is not good for roads.
So the two things that anybody who's grown up with Kahn knows that he said were, I asked the brick what it wanted to be, and the brick told me it wanted to be an arch. So Kahn liked to talk to bricks. He said, I literally has these conversations with bricks, and from that he finds the form of his architecture.
But it's Kahn.
That's Kahn.
Yeah. I like this idea. So the conversation with the bricks, you know, it's fantastic.
Well, I thought of it, visiting the sites of your work, because you not only build by painting bricks, but you literally build. You like to build. We'll see some sites where you build. You like to pile things and make things. But the other
made sculptures with bricks too.
And the other great famous quote of Louis Kahn is, "Great architecture is what makes great ruins." Great architecture makes great ruins.
This is unfortunately what Speer and Hitler said too. Unfortunately, they said the buildings has to be in stone, not in concrete, because it gives better ruins, you know. And it's true, you know, when you see these films of the German bombarded houses, it's so beautiful, you know. Then the bricks fall down, and they are ready to resurrect, you know, to do something new. So because the destruction is not destruction; it's also reconstruction at the same time. When I see a ruin, that's something starts there, you know. When it's done, you forget it, because you have nothing to do, you know. But when it's a ruin, then you start, and then it's fine, you know. It's a starting point.
Yeah. So I have to ask you about something which, unfortunately, I have not experienced personally, which is your work at, we're going to skip past, well, actually, there.
There I bought, in Germany, once a brick factory who was too old to be erfolgreich successful. And this, for example, is a hall where they aufbewahrt, they stuck the clay, they stored the clay during winter, because in winter they couldn't dig. And this was landscapes I liked very much. I didn't do so much there, but it's wonderful, you know. You see. So wait a minute. You go to.
I go too fast. Okay.
This is the bricks. The first floor, underneath are the ovens, you know, the fires. And there are the bricks, and then it goes up here and goes out to the ceiling, the steam.
Is Lynette Witter here? I don't know, you're going to have to, Lynette, I think you have to take Anselm to see your brick construction in the garden afterwards when we have the reception, because we have a temporary piling of bricks in an intriguing way. I haven't had the privilege yet of visiting Barjac.
This is completely different. This is not bricks.
No, but we're going to concrete.
No. This is stones, as I built in south of France, you know.
So this site, where you have been working for decades, constructing, here we see an aerial view, and then.
No, this is Barjac. This is another thing. This is in south of France, where I lived. How long I worked there? 20 years. 20 years, and there I built houses not to living, but houses for the paintings, for the artwork, and some sculptures and all this. And so I'm still constructing there, because you know what you start as a child, you continue all the time. You know, it's clear. And you know, also writers, they told me all invocation, all inspiration they get from what they saw as a child, you know, and from there comes all your inspiration, you know, and so I continue to construct things.
So are those conscious memories, or things that are somehow coming back from the unconscious for you?
This is psychoanalysis. I don't need this, you know.
Okay.
I know just that I have it, you know.
So I want to skip.
Psychoanalytic can be very boring, you know. Can be,
especially when done by an amateur. But what is the relationship for you between the construction of these monuments and the painting of monuments? So you operate both as in a sense, between sculptor and architect, and these sites in the south of France.
You know,
but you're also building through.
I do what I can, you know. I can construct things. I can paint things. I cannot play piano. I cannot play tennis. I can just these two things. Okay.
All right. Now that I'm going to really try your patience. Don't look, Anselm, because we're going to go so far ahead. Stop me if you want to talk about any of these specific constructions. But it would seem is a...
These are towers, you know, and they are made out of containers, you know. I put two containers together to have an L shape, and put concrete in, and then I take the containers away. And then it's a very good tool, because they are containers. Containers means a lot, you know. It's globalization and all this, you know.
But these landscapes strike me as being somehow in a, I don't know what the right word is, so they're somewhere between construction and destruction, between building and
It's
So I had wanted to segue from Louis Kahn to this because
there's no Trennung. There's no
division.
There's no separation. Construction and deconstruction. It goes all the time on. You know, a painter who is not an iconoclast is not a good painter. You know, you have to destroy always what you do, because you're never satisfied. You know, so destroy it, and from the destruction comes a new thing. It's always a flux. It's never stopped. It's only stopped if it's a museum, then I can continue, you know.
I want to jump ahead for our last chapter to the Pantheon, where you see the sequence in this, in a certain sense, from building to destruction to actually intervening in a building. And of course, then I want to open to some questions on these chapters. I think, Bill.
But, you know, I have the choice now, if I want to bury it here or in the Pantheon, you know.
Now there's,
You're provoking me as though to ask you
the questions that a psychiatrist
There
might, but I'm not going to go further.
There I built some towers in the water, in the sea. And this goes on and on. All these buildings have sculptures in or installations or paintings. And
You've built far more than many architects, actually.
Huh?
You've built far more than many architects, actually.
No, how much buildings we have there, Walter? 50?
50
buildings, yeah. That's underneath. I did, underneath this area, I did tunnels, you know. And it's kilometers of tunnels, and all the buildings are connected with tunnels. You know, I wanted to go with these tunnels to Germany, you know. But I landed, you know, Jacques Lang? He gave me this house, he showed me this house in south of France, and then I was going there, and then the landscape is very beautiful, but I couldn't use it for my work, you know, it was not me, you know. And then I thought, I go with a tunnel to Germany, you know.
This is going to drive you all crazy.
Oh, now we're on the Grand Palais.
Yeah. Well,
This
here
is
we brought that whole landscape inside.
Yeah, yeah. This was did you see it? It's long ago. 20 years ago. Yeah. 2007. Yeah.
Let's go ahead to...
That's in Milano.
You gave me too many.
The Hangar Bicocca. So when I had two of these towers in Barjac, then someone came from which enterprise? Well done. Pirelli came and saw these two towers, only two towers. You know, I started in Barjac, and he was fascinated. And I said, I have a big hall in Milano, 30 meters high, you know, and do something there. And I put 7 of these towers in this hall, and it was fantastic to do it, you know. And yeah, that's Milan. If you go to Milan, Hangar Bicocca.
Okay, we're going to skip. We're not going to go to New York
now
yet.
we are in New York.
No. We're going very quickly. Don't pay no attention to this until we get to here.
Go slower.
You want to talk about the earlier ones? You want to go back to New York?
Go slower, because...
Okay.
No, this is not so interesting.
La Tourette?
This is Le Corbusier, you see, in La Tourette. I was once in La Tourette when I was young. I was 3 weeks, lived with the monks. And later, a few years ago, they asked me to do a show there. It's a wonderful architecture from Le Corbusier.
I want to bring you to this because this is not only nearby.
Oh, now we are...
This is going to take us to the theme of ruin and monument, back to come full circle.
You know, you do it like on an iPhone, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's because... It's because you sent me 168 images. So I want to take us here, and I want to just take for a little bit moment to play the professor, because I was very involved with the history of this monument in the context of the bicentennial of the French Revolution. So one is, of course, fascinated by the revolution,
which is going both to destroy and build and transform and appropriate and change and try to control the meaning of things by assigning them new purposes, new names, artistic commissions, transformations. Raises the whole question of whether something that is built with one intention can actually be, as you say, can be turned around, can be reconverted, can somehow be wrestled with. So that, of course, needs no explanation. This is a building which is unfinished at the time of the revolution, designed to be a church, to be the most powerful symbol of the relationship between monarchy and religion, between the altar and the throne, if you will, in the France of Louis XV, incomplete at the time of the revolution. You see the...
You know, the Pantheon was very beautiful as a church.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, they told me how it was,
Yeah.
and it was, they ruined it. But before, it was a wonderful architecture as a church, you know.
So, yes, so quickly, as built as a church, the thing that fascinated me by this building when I was invited to do this exhibition in 1989 was that for over 100 years, every time the government changed in France, they changed this building. They commissioned new artists to come in to either convert it to a church, back to a temple. And so you intervened in what I was calling with friends the other day when I went again to see your installations. You intervened into what I think is a battlefield of the French Revolution that went on for over a century, in fact, instead of for 10 years, as the windows were filled in to create the Pantheon, as the revolution came up with the idea of aux grands hommes, la patrie reconnaissante, tried to convert a church into a completely new idea of great men, forcibly took the remains of Voltaire and Rousseau and implanted them into this building. And here, the crypt of the building, where you've told us that maybe you've reserved a place, meant for monks, but in the end, installed with philosophers and others more recently. Here's an attempt to remove an idea that you might be able to control the Pantheon by removing the dome and creating a pyramid through it for making it an ascent for viewing all of Paris. In the middle of the 19th century, the sacred nature of the dome was attempted to be tamed for science by installing Foucault's pendulum to show the rotation of the Earth on its axis. And we could go on, but it's into that context with this absolutely monumental sequence of Third Republic histories of the life of Saint Genevieve as a kind of national history. I think these are not paintings that you admire greatly, but maybe you do.
I put some paintings in front of.
You've put something in front of them. There you go.
But they didn't let it be. They took it away.
And into that have come these 6 extraordinary vitrines. And now back to your own photographs of that interior, as it was transformed by you temporarily for the installation of very large-scale paintings. But even once they left and went back to your studio, these extraordinary vitrines that you created for the transfer of the remains of the war poet Maurice Genevoix in one of the most recent translations, invited by President Emmanuel Macron to intervene into this space that I see as a space simultaneously of tranquility, but once you start to read it, it's a space of conflict, of conflicting interpretations, of conflicting attempts to deal with the messiness of history. And I think for me, your work, in a certain sense, excavates that messiness where so many have attempted to...
You showed it very precisely. This building is an example of a mess, you know, because I changed it all the time. First it was a wonderful church, and I made this and this and this. This was messing up, you know. Mm-hmm. And yes.
But tell us about the commission. Can you tell the story of the commission, how it came about, and what your first thoughts are? What did it mean? What did you think when you thought, I'm going to do something in the Pantheon? What can I possibly do there?
You know, I like to move in historical buildings. I like to be part of the history, you know, it's clear. And it was very simple. The president asked me if I want to do something, and I did.
Yes?
So.
Did you tell him what you were going to do, or he gave you free hand?
I was in contact with him. He was in my studio. We discussed, and I had some propositions, and we discussed, and then I had another proposition. We worked together on it.
Let's zoom in on them. Here's a view through two of them in the context of these Third Republic very monumental narrative paintings, which probably for many visitors remind them almost of illustrations in the type of history textbooks that French children might have grown up with, to go back full cycle to school. I have so many questions, but what is your attitude about the relationship of your intervention, your vitrines, to this cycle of murals? It's interesting. Some of the vitrines let us view through the installation. Some of them obscure our views.
My first access, my main access was the biography of Genevois. So I read his books, I read his history, what he did. He was an officer in the First World War. And what he wrote about the war, it was new, because it was not dulce decorum est patria mori, it was not pathetic and all this. He was very connected with the soldiers and what they saw, what they lived, and all this. This was new in war history. So I read this, and I read other books from. There's a German writer. What is his name again? Who wrote a book too about the Second World War? Waltraud, wie heißt er? Huh? Ernst Jünger. Yeah. Sometimes I have a little bit blackout. Ernst Jünger, and I read this too, but it's completely different. I compared it. Ernst Jünger, for him, it was a transition. It was a transcendental experience to be verwundet, to be injured, and he was 3 times. He was nearly dead, Ernst Jünger, and he had a lot of experience. And so I was going very deeply in the history of the First World War, and that was my. I didn't care so much about the building. I cared about meine Aufgabe, my job.
Your assignment,
was to do something for Genevois, for the writer who his bones was took out of the earth and put then now in the Pantheon. This was what I was not so much intrigued by the paintings or stuff there.
Yeah, but I think it's an extraordinary gesture, and the reason I wanted the last part of our conversation to come back here is that you had the daring, I'm going to say, and you can resist this, to bring the ruin into the monument. Because you actually, when you think about the presence of both war and of writers in the Pantheon, either there is the representation of war as the glorious history of France.
Yeah.
There's nothing very glorious about what you've brought in. And when it comes to writers, their names are inscribed. Very near here is a list of writers who, on the wall in gold letters, who were lost in the war. It's a kind of memorial, but only through names. But you actually bring this confrontation with the actuality of the war, the detritus of the war, the aftermath of the war, these landscapes of ruin and destruction into a monument that actually generally effaces the very violence that's everywhere present.
First time in the history, the First World War showed that war is not a heroic thing. It's a horrible thing with blood, with dreck, mud, and all this. It's very unpleasant. And this Genevois showed very well, and then after the Second World War, it's even more clear that it's not dulce et decorum est.
It's to me, it's absolutely extraordinary
gesture to look across this field of molten lead, of ruin, of stones that are disrupted. And this is the one where clearly you look through to the glorification in the Third Republic painting is a real confrontation, I think, as I say, of the power of bringing the ruinous into the supposed eternal calm
and
of
the suffering.
Yeah.
All vitrines have quotations of Genevois. So it gives another look on the war, on what is on the shit of the war, you know.
What a wonderful room we're in. We had an incredible conversation, but now is the time to go enjoy yourselves in the garden and saying a great big thanks to Barry and Mr. Kiefer.